So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 10th edition of Africa Rice. We're so happy to have you here in person, online. Over 500 of you are joining us for this milestone weekend. So really, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's made all the past months of work so worth it. Seeing you all, seeing the writers, we're super happy. We are starting with an evening with Blitz Bazawule and Iranosan Okoji, and culminating in a conversation with two literary giants on Sunday night, Kwame Dawes and Claudia Rankin. We'll also be announcing our Lifetime Achievement Award at the end, and there's just so much wonderful stuff in between, so don't miss it. We'll be diving into the theme of intangible heritage, which is, something that really resonates deeply with the whole essence of Africa Rights. We've compiled the creative vision of our 6 curators and our programming partners, looking at the intangible, the unspoken, all the timeless aspects of our cultural heritage. And really, we're so pleased with the program. And our thanks go out to the brilliant minds who've helped shape this event, including Yomi Shode, Annie Hiedoro of Brittle Paper, Nancy Adimora of Afrida, Maaza Mengisti, Suleiman Adonia of Asmara Addis Literary Festival, Kalape Palanga, our advisory board, Caitlin Pearson, Jonah Albert, Mireille Cassandra Harper, Bibi Bakari Yusuf. Our gratitude to all the guest writers as well, and the ecosystem of agents and publishers that made their participation possible. Our partners, Royal Society of Literature, Arts Council England, Frexham Bank, Garfield Western Foundation, Amazon, Africa No Filter, and really 10 years of Africa Rights. I have to thank colleagues way past and present for making this possible. Our producer tonight, all weekend, Nat Fiawu as well. Give it up for Nat. I vividly remember my first Africa Rights in 2013 when Ngugi wa Thiong'o was here, and just the atmosphere and the inspiration, and I'd never been to a festival like it. So it's really an honor to be involved organizing this one. I know that we have people who've traveled all the way from Zambia, all the way from the States, and all over. So thank you for making the trip to be here with us. It's really a testament to the power of literature and how it brings us all together. I hope you enjoy, get involved, ask questions, meet new people. We'll have some wonderful Senegalese food all weekend as well. And buy books from Book Club and Roundtable. And don't leave without giving us your little feedback forms too. It's really important so we can keep improving the festivals as we go. And let's go into the festival with open hearts and curious minds. Thank you so much to all of our colleagues at Royal African Society. And I would now like to pass the mic to one of our council members, Keith Shiri, who's a film expert and has long been a fan of Blitz, one of Blitz's biggest fans perhaps. So he will introduce the event tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
So, thank you so much, Desta. It's my first time to be part of this Royal African Society, and I'm so kind of looking at the lights and look at everyone, and I'm seeing Janet there, and thank you and welcome to the Royal African Society as our new director. And for me, I won't take too much of your time. I'm just going to introduce you to this gentleman. And I first met Blitz 2018, I think. I think the first time I got a call from my colleague, Tendeka Matatu, who is the director of Netflix Africa. He said to me, Keith, you have to see this film. And I said, but you have to see this film. I said, please, what is it? You have to see this film. You must see the film, which was the Burial of Kojo. And I saw this clip. And I said, please, can you ask Blitz for the full film? And I saw it. Beautiful piece of work I've never seen. Frame by frame. after having watched films for over 30 years, I'm a programmer. I also write sometimes, but the fluency of this work mesmerized me. The last time I was mesmerized by a film was for the first time when I watched Djibril Diop Mambeti's Tukibuki. And the light, the ownership of light and the script and the human face and the process, that was just one most extraordinary piece of work from somebody's first film. And I thought, we need to have this guy to come to London. We need to give an example of the ownership of the image, the vocabulary, grammar of cinema, of African storytelling is all about. Not prescribed, but something coming from within. The aesthetics and the process of that small film that he did impressed me so much that we had to take it to Nigeria. And I just saw Blitz just now, and it reminded me that the last time we saw each other was in Egypt. But we also screened this film in Spain. I came back last night. I just came back from Seville. And then I had some kind of, catalog of his film. So the idea is that it's from word, from grammar, from the script, onto migrating onto the screen. That's one most important achievement. He wrote, he imagined, he dreamt, and he got the source and managed to make that film. And then now, today, we're coming to celebrate another dimension. He's coming again with a debut of a story. And for me, it's somebody who's always an advocate for, I always say that Africa has got 3 phases. It's got a moment of slavery, a moment of colonial period, and then of course the euphoria of independence. So you have the euphoria of independence. It was so fascinating for me. 60s Africa. The 60s, not just Africa, 60s Europe. The Paris kind of students' riots, the civil rights, United States of America, and everything else that actually for me, when you read Blitz's story, he was not even born. But it's quite extraordinary because it's a chapter of history which for me resonates perfectly well, fits in within the story of transatlantic relationship, which somehow, for me, was not favorable to the continent. Those people like Kwame Nkrumah who really had hope, young people, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, who had a dream of the United States of America, or of Africa, sorry. And then their dreams were shattered. Then the story was bent. In other words, it was something that is, for me, it resonates in the story of this relationship that plays in Africa. And in conversation with Blitz, is Ira Sen, the novelist, writer, and they're going to have I don't want to take too much time. I can go on and go on and go on and go on and go on about all his work. But I'll let them kind of, take it further and spend the next hour or so and in conversation and exploring the story about the book, about whatever the topic, whatever the journey this conversation is going to take us. Can I invite Blitz, please, and Innocent, please, on stage, please?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brilliance Kojo. I am delighted to be moderating this conversation with I think, one of the most exciting polymaths we have on the scene across multiple mediums. Also, hello to our online audience watching. Thank you for joining us. We are live with Blitz Bazawule, who is here to talk about his project, well, various projects. His latest book, The Scent of Burnt Flowers, as well as his film projects. But before we get into it, let's have a look at the trailer for The Scent of Burnt Flowers.
The Scent of Burnt Flowers, a hypnotic debut novel by Blitz Bazawule. Accra, 1966. The journey of a black couple seeking asylum in Ghana births unstoppable danger, unearthed secrets, undeniable attraction, and unbound magic. See why the New York Times calls it vibrant and skillfully crafted. Experience The Scent of Burnt Flowers. In stores now. Because if an animal will bite you, it will be from your cloth.
All right.
What a cool trailer. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Before we get into it, just to say that there will be time for audience questions later on, so please do have your questions in mind, both for the audience here and the audience at home. Blitz, huge congratulations on this book. It's incredible. You know, it's a kaleidoscopic, pacey read. It's this couple, Bernadette and Melvin, who are Americans. They flee Alabama, head to Ghana for refuge. We don't know why initially they flee Alabama. They head to Ghana. They then get in contact with this high life musician and go on this journey, this amazing journey that's sort of rife with trouble and a really interesting trajectory. Bless you. Plus a kind of inept FBI agent hot on their tail. I mean, it's got everything. It's got a lovelorn ghost. You know, it's got this thriller element, but it's also got this conjuring of Kwame Nkrumah, you know, who's like, you know, the president, both in his early life and later on. So there's this historical element, and it's just this alchemic piece of work that I found really, really intriguing. I don't know how you've managed to do this, but you are prodigiously gifted. It's scary. Congratulations on the novel. I'm really curious about laying the groundwork for this book, what your intentions were for it, if you could talk to us a little bit about that, and why at this juncture in your career, because there's a lot happening for you. Yeah, it'd be great to know.
First, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you, Keith. I mean, I should take you everywhere with me. I don't even think I need a PR agent. No, I'm really, really thankful to have, one, just the courage, you know, to try things. You know, I think that for me, that's just really what it's all been about. And trying The Scent of Burnt Flowers was, you know, I wish I could say, or I could put it in such an eloquent way as you did in terms of just how it all comes together. But I truly am of the opinion that you do it as you feel it, you know, and, you know, if the feeling's strong enough, it'll sustain you, and you'll eventually get to a place that makes sense. So I didn't really start writing this book with any clear intent except the fact that the work deserved to exist. And that's something that I'm going to keep coming back to, guys, because there are a lot of artists in the house, lots of writers, lots of visual artists, lots of, you know, musicians, you know, creative people in general, you know. And I think that it's very important that we focus on doing work strictly because the work deserves to exist. And as someone who's born in Ghana, someone who has experienced what it is like to seek work that I'm curious about but not find it, in a country of 30 million plus people, I find it peculiar that we just haven't thrown ourselves into telling all the myriads of our stories that we have, you know, and there are all types of reasons why, but I just believed in telling this one because I needed to read it. You know, I just needed it. I needed, you know, I love high life music. I love that era of Ghana, as Keith was saying, this rebirth, this euphoria of independence, this promise of a new world, a new life that was deeply shattered and undermined. I wanted to read that stuff, you know, and it took years of building courage to say, okay, well, maybe not this year, but next year, I got to get to it. And, you know, when COVID happened, I just found myself in a place where I couldn't keep it anymore. I was just like, all right, this is it, and this work does need to exist, and I'm going to go at it, you know. And it was hard work, but it was also fulfilling work because I got to really dig into, you know, parts of my storytelling technique that I hadn't tried before. The beautiful thing about the literary world is just the ease at which you can jump time. I mean, you can't try it in music. People will be like, what the hell? Mm-hmm. And certainly film is a bit similar, but it's still harder because we're still used to this propulsion of cinema. You know, I was jumping time like I was jumping space. I was jumping wherever I wanted to in this book, and I found it truly liberating and freeing.
That's so inspiring. I love that you say the work deserves to exist. And I think that's really important for aspiring filmmakers, aspiring writers and creatives to hear, because sometimes I think we can get in our own way, you know, and that self-doubt gets in the way. So it's really inspiring to hear you say that. I love the fact that this book is so African and that it's very much anchored in Ghana, so pre-colonial Ghana.
Yes.
And it's richly evocative, the rhythms, the sensibilities. I was completely transported. And Ghana feels almost like another character in and of itself. So I wondered, you know, you spent some time in Ghana, obviously. You grew up there before you moved to the States, I think, for college, perhaps,
yes.
Yeah? So I would love to know how this heritage has really shaped your work, because for me, it feels very much anchored in your work. And I love that. I see that thread through, whether it's your music videos, you know, your film, your books, that thread is present, and it's really palpable, and it's beautiful. So I would love for you to talk about that.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I'm, you know, tribal Sisala, right? I'm from the Bazawule clan. We're from the most northern part of Ghana. And, you know, I was fortunate to grow up in a world that storytelling was central. You know, my grandmother, till this day, I still say, the greatest storyteller I've ever known. You know, better than any Netflix series, you know, better than any, you know, HBO show. No, and I say that because of the ease at which she was able to, you know, when we grew up in a neighborhood called Medina. And Medina, it took a while for electricity to come to Medina. So if you know anything about that life, then you know at 6 p.m. the world starts to go like that, you know. You know, the lanterns, you got to do the whole lantern globe thing, you know. So I did that for a while, and the one thing that kept us excited was the expectation of our grandmother's story time, you know, nocturnal story time. And, you know, I still believe till this day that my deep love for storytelling, my deep curiosity for storytelling, my ideas of what linear storytelling is versus what non-linear storytelling is, cyclical storytelling, all of that comes from sitting at my grandmother's feet, listening to stories. And what was peculiar and amazing was every night, you know, she had to come up with a new story now. I don't know how that woman did it, but it was like characters would reincarnate as as a chair or a table the next time, as a bird, as a a tortoise, So like I've always known stories to be so fluid, and I say this like being very clear that this is my experience, and not everyone has a way in which they get into story. But for me, it was just deeply rich and non-restrictive, and so I found that every chance that I've gotten, and irrespective of the medium, I've just thrown myself into my grandmother's idea of story. And it has been truly, and so when you say Ghana is present, I mean, it's really grandma, or as Emma, as we call it, is present, and that is what's kept me going. And I've also always guaranteed that I'll always tell stories my way, irrespective of what the medium is, irrespective of what the medium is, as I found, having the great privilege of reimagining Alice Walker's Color Purple, I was shook going in, it's not I'm not gonna front like it was like the easiest thing to walk into, but I was also quite confident that I couldn't make a Steven Spielberg movie. It's just, I don't have that language.
Well, we're gonna come to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you about that specifically because I think that's really interesting. But I love this idea of your grandma. I can relate. Growing up in Nigeria, in Benin, spending time, hearing those folk tales, also exactly the same thing. The stories would mutate, also depending on who was telling them. The ending would change. And there was always some kind of transformation and some sort of lesson.
Oh,
the lesson, come on.
That's what this was all about, guys.
Yes.
Like the moral of the tale.
Exactly.
Okay?
So when you said that, I was like, yes, I completely relate. No, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, you're unbelievably gifted in multiple areas, Blitz. Phenomenal visual artist. I mean, phenomenal.
Thank
It's
you.
sickening.
Now I have two
to be
PR
honest.
agents.
I mean, it really is.
Sherry and
It's just
I'm lucky.
absolutely sickening. Great novelist,
Thank you.
director, musician. So let me say, I discovered you years ago, your music, and that was how I discovered you. And I was like, this guy is really interesting.
Wow.
Just the motifs you were using were quite experimental and subversive, but like I said, very African. And I was like, this is really bold. So your stuff stayed with me, but that was how I first discovered you. It's like, who is this exciting, fresh musician that's like from Ghana, but also US based? And I absolutely loved your music. I'm really curious what the process is like for you as a novelist. How different is it in comparison to the other mediums that you operate in? And how do you feel you've evolved working in the novel form? Because this is your debut novel. It is brilliant, sickening.
Thank you.
But
thank you. No, I think about that sometimes. Just like, what's the common thread and why? And I've really been, I've arrived at the notion that it's all the same thing. Yeah, the mediums are different. The goals and targets might shift, but it's the same stream, right? That sometimes is stagnant, becomes a lake, sometimes becomes a river, sometimes flows into the sea. It's just like, and I think we all have these things in us that are just like, the perspective is always the same, right? And for me, it's been about discerning and asking myself what the medium should be. Because when you have the idea, like not every idea is good for a film. Promise me, I can attest to that. Not every idea is good for a book. Not every idea is good for a song. Some things are just better. Some ideas are also just better left alone. And be real about that too. So it's really just being discerning enough to know, all right, what shape should this take? It's the same breath, right? But it's like, what body does it, what does it embody this time, And because of that, I feel like I've gone into creating everything with the same excitement and zeal, I've never quite gone, I'm making a movie, so I have to become a director. You know, because you know the director thing. You gotta like sit like this, and you gotta have a stick, and you have
Certain mannerisms.
action and cuts and all that shit. You know, for me, it's just like it's the same thing. You know, days of showing up on stage and rocking to 1,000 people, sometimes 10,000 people, is like the same thing. Whatever I want to elicit in that crowd is what I have to imbue my work with cinematically, right? It's the same thing I have to imbue my book with, literary. So for me, it's just been that, and I've really just tried to stay as in tune to what the work is, you know, and look, sometimes, and it is how it is, you know. You know, he said gifted. I really do think my only real gift is curiosity. Like, truly, I don't think I'm great at anything. This is just my honest, true opinion. But I am curious as fuck, you know. And I will keep trying that thing until something unlocks in it. Yeah. And sometimes I might be good enough at it, and sometimes I'll suck at it. And I'll just go, you know what? This is what no one is going to see. And that's fine too, but I do think that we are as people, you know, we need to give ourselves the license to try. We're a multiplicity of things, guys. When no one's born one thing. I mean, of course, the world in which we exist in seeks to narrow us down to a thing, and all of it is for control purposes, trust me. But I really believe that for me, it's really been about always going, you know, I'm many things. And some things I'm going to be great at, some things I'm going to be mediocre at, and I'm fine with that. Yeah. You know, and the things that are great, I would love to share with the world. You know, and the things that are mediocre, guess what? They'll stay in my little mediocre side. And I'm cool with that too, right? So I just, you know, deeply encourage us all to always just know that you are many things, and there are things you should try, because you'll be amazed at how good you are at them. You know, and some things are commercial and you can get to the world, and some things are personal. Like one day I was like, I bet you I could cook. Like for real cook. Like really, really make some like Michelin star shit. And actually I wasn't bad. I mean, not Michelin star shit, but I was good enough. And I was like, all right, well, that's just for me and my friends. I'm happy to take folk out and cook and hang out. And that's cool, right? And if you're 10 times better than me, then you should have a dope restaurant, right? It's just what it is. And I really believe that we should always just try.
That's fantastic, and so like hugely and deeply encouraging. You know, you talk about the multiplicities of the self, yes. And like you said, if you don't try, you might fail. Sure. But it's the curiosity, it's that desire to learn more about the world and yourself and what's possible that I think spurs us on, you know, and it's just deeply helpful. If you're an artistic person, you know, there are multiple realms that you could operate in. It's about being brave, you know, and looking to those people who give you permission to do so, which brings me to my next question, which is, one of my favorite things is when I discover somebody whose work that I love, I want to know who their literary ancestors are. Sure. Because I think that that's hugely important. When I think of literary ancestors, I think of Toni Morrison. Sure. I think of Amos Tutuola. I think of, you know, somebody like Chigozie Obioma, who's quite new, but amazing African cosmologies. Wow. You know, and reading your work, I was reminded of like Chester Himes, Walter Mosley, you know, because it's got this wonderful thriller element, but then you're doing something different with the form. You're expanding it. You're taking it in a new direction. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so he's taking the thriller form and reimagining it with these fantastical elements. So I'm so curious about who, because I know they're going to be good, about who your literary ancestors are.
Well, let me think. Marquez, for me, is a major one. Grew up reading a bunch of Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude and The General and His Labyrinth. I mean, these are brilliant books that, like, they also reminded me of my grandmother's stories, right? Those like deeply imaginative, but also quite very accessible, right? Because there's another kind of like woozy writing that you go, my God, I'm lost. You know, it's like this cat's taking me deep, right? I'm not big on that deep shit, you know. But Marquez is always good. Ben Okri's fantastic. I love Ben Okri's work. It's another one that's just like deeply accessible, but like so magical in the narrative. Isabel Allende is another one that I love deeply. You said Toni before, like I Live and Die by Toni Morrison all day.
Every book is incredible.
All day.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, there's several, but I think these like, you know, yeah, I think.
No, those are phenomenal recommendations.
Yes.
I was just really, really curious. And they all make sense as well. Looking at your work and your sensibilities on film, they completely make sense to me. So The Scent of Burnt Flowers, it's a daring book, you know, exploring themes of colonialism, misogyny, race, love-struck ghosts, among other things. You know, like I said, we mentioned the fantastical elements, so like flowers emerging from guitars, women breathing underwater in the sea, you know, soldiers mutating, which is fantastic. And it really speaks to your, I think, subversive qualities. Like you are naturally somebody that goes against the grain, I feel. So I was curious about your choice. Is it a choice or is it just instinctive in you that that's the direct? I'm really curious about that because sometimes it's a choice, isn't it?
Sure.
And then sometimes it's like you can't help it, that's who you are. So I was wondering about that boldness in your work to sort of challenge expectations. You know, when did you know that's who you are as an artist? And how did you cultivate that voice?
Oh, wow. Great questions. The when. I think for a very long time, I've known that I've had odd ass taste. Like, you know, just like you know, when my friends liked certain songs, I hated them. The album cuts that nobody liked, I loved them. You know, and it's just been like that, and I've embraced it fully because I feel like there's something about even if you miss, right? There's something about trying that I naturally gravitate to. I gravitate to people that swing for the fences. I watch movies that just you go, man, boy, that guy missed, but damn, that was bold and daring, right? And I find life to be quite boring when it's like wrapped in what's familiar. I just can't stand. It's like, why, bro? You had time. You had time to give me something that I just wouldn't. And again, even if I don't like it, I respect it, right? And I just kind of naturally, you know, I root for that kind of person. You know, I don't like basic. I don't like shit that everybody likes. Like, why? It's a big world. Like, people are trying things, and we need to support those because out of that trying, you know, and this goes back to the work deserving to exist, right? Out of that trying births something. I believe that all the work we do is truly on a continuum, a very long one, right? And I think I'm speaking specifically as Black people who do art, we're so, and I know this sounds like a gross generalization, but I'll take a stab at it. We're so concerned with how we're seen in time, right? You know, what are the reviews? Because it's all transactional, and will I get my next book out? Or will I have to sell tickets so I can make my next movie? It's like, it's just this very, and that part is always in the way of us just doing the damn work because it deserves to be here, you know? And also deeper than that, like, let's also remember that the work's not for us alone. And certainly when I say us here in this space and in this time, the people coming who are gonna have radically different worlds and are gonna need those people who saw far ahead to meet them, right? And so I kind of divorced myself quite early from basic metrics. You know, I don't read reviews. I honestly don't care. You know, like, sure, you like it, good for you. You hate it, good for you. I just move on. And I think that's also been a great coping mechanism for me to never care about the time and whether the work's understood or whether the work's gonna, none of that matters. The work, just doing it in and of itself is the deepest, most subversive thing you can do. And let's remember this. There are people who were considered mediocre for their time, right? Mediocre as hell. Whose work, out of the virtue that it just existed, are considered classics today. Let's never forget that. There are also people whose work, whether it was deeply false, characterized, merely because they did that work, characterized this time. I'll give you examples. Writers like Solis, Gomorrah, and even someone like Hernan Cortez himself, right? The writing that these guys did when they pillaged, destroyed the so-called Indies, destruction, I mean, pure annihilation of a people. That work, now those guys were considered mediocre writers of that time. Now remember, this is like Renaissance time, so like they were real writers. These guys were mediocre, but it didn't matter because that work that they wrote down became the basis of how we process indigenous peoples, the justification around their annihilation and destruction, and every book, every century that has come around has just built on that. And that's falsehoods. Those are gross falsehoods, deep conjecture, just made shit up. But they did the work. You understand? They wrote it down, and it was published, and was in the world. So I'm really a proponent for just doing the damn work, because it's going to matter. Even if it doesn't matter today, at this very minute, it doesn't pay your bills. It doesn't get you whatever you hope you're gonna get, whatever trinkets they give out these days, because best believe the trinkets are always changing, right? Always changing. There's some new shit that you gotta aspire to. But I'm very clear about that, and I know that none of the work I do is for that. The work I do is for a higher purpose. It is an offering, and I don't compare my offerings to the offerings of anybody else. Let's be clear.
Yes.
Everybody has their offerings, and everybody's offering is acceptable in the eyes of the divine, and that's all that matters. And if we think about it that way, I think we become a little bit more focused on just
Doing the work.
Doing it, you know, and having deep fulfillment. And I'm talking deep fulfillment, like I enjoy process. Like I don't want it to stop. You know, one of my, great inspirations is the Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa.
Oh, incredible. Yeah.
So he has this, talk, I'm going to paraphrase. He talks about, when you go mountain climbing, the first thing they tell you is don't look at the peak. Concentrate on your feet and just keep walking. At some point you realize that you're there. And I've really lived by this maxim because it is deeply what I believe creativity should be. There are no high point. It's just all of it is just a blessing. Every piece, even the days that are terrible, and you can only get 5 words on that page. Cherish those 5 words. They're going to mean something in the scheme of things. They're going to be the lines that people go, oh my God, that line. They don't know that it was only 5 words you could pull out that day, right? But that's my point. Is just we just have to believe and do the work because the work's for a higher purpose.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think that deserves a round of applause, honestly.
Oh, thank you.
Just dropping gems this evening. 2 takeaways from that: do the work, and you're a bit of a weirdo, which I love. That's what I'm saying. You're an oddball.
Oddball.
And oddballs
I embrace
are awesome.
it
and
fully.
it's just about embracing your oddness. And I think also as Black creatives, that's really important to do that, because very often we're told that you can only be in a certain box.
Right.
So just like have the freedom to absolutely be yourself. If you like stuff that's slightly more alternative, go for it, because like look how far it will take you. You know, if you embrace that and you really do the work. I want to come back to the first time I really discovered you, and I saw your music video for Shine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So Shine is just like this young black girl moving through the urban. Firstly, the music was dope.
Thank you.
So there's that. But it's this young black girl moving through the urban landscape with her egungun, so her masquerade sort of spirit manifestation, who is simpatico with her in every way. They move through the city, they're having the same movements, the same thoughts, the same like rhythms, the same beating heart. They move as one. But also like she just had this verve and power. And I was so struck by that. I loved that video so much. So that was the first time I discovered you. Then I saw Running, which was, I think, is that from the same diasporic? Like,
trilogy,
yeah, fantastic. And that was diasporic, I think, shot in Brazil.
Shot in Bahia.
So, around like ancestral practices. Like so interesting. I was like, wow, this guy, like the motifs he's using, you know, they are like large in scope, they're diasporic, they're also really specific. I want to talk about going from that to the Burial of Kojo. And I have to take a breath because the Burial of Kojo, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely tremendous.
Thank you.
It's phenomenal. I saw that, like Keith could have done 3 hours. I don't know if you guys noticed, but and I completely understand where that comes from, because this film, so it's about this, you know, little black girl in Ghana. Her father's trapped in a mine, and she goes through this magical journey to sort of try to rescue him. But also there's this sibling rivalry between her father and her uncle. But what struck me about this film was the way it, like Keith said, every single frame was lovingly crafted. There was so much love in this film. The color palette was insane. You know, the characters sometimes shrouded in blue or red, which was indicative of their power or agency, depending on what context we found them in, the layers within that. I mean, just stunning. To me, it felt like a series of chimeric paintings coming alive.
Wow.
That is how I would describe that film.
I'm using that.
I'm your second PR person. Just incredible. So talk about the Burial of Kojo, because, you know, we know that there are creatives in the audience, filmmakers, writers, and your pathway is really inspirational. So can you just, what was that path between your music and then Burial of Kojo happening?
That's a great question. So I've, when I made music primarily, and I use the word primarily because I always did other things. They were not yet in the forefront of my creative life. But when I made music primarily, I found that and you know, I had the privilege of touring over 30 countries. I was truly blessed. My band, I mean, we played every corner you could find, we played. And I found that as I traveled and met other bands that were either from the continent or diaspora, there was something interesting about how black music has flourished. When I say flourished, I mean, boy, has it flourished. Every style, jazz, funk, blues, Afro beats, let's not forget. You know, hip hop, R&B, samba, rumba. I mean, just the list goes everywhere you find us. We are just like combustion with sound, right? And rhythm and things that are deeply us, right? And I just would always go, why don't we have this thing, this whatever is happening on this stage that has got 20,000 people just like in the highest elation and euphoria? Why doesn't it exist in the other creative endeavors, like film? Like, what's the jazz equivalent of cinema? Right? What's the jazz equivalent of hip hop? What's the jazz equivalent of rumba or whatever? Like, these are languages, you know what I mean, that then kind of everybody comes and births a new vocabulary. But, like what Miles Davis did, like where is the film? And I don't mean it as like, I mean it like in like a deep meta way. Even though I said I hate deep shit, like that's what I mean. Like, just like, where is that thing that you just go and you go, oh, I feel like jazz. I couldn't find it. Because we were all kind of had narrowed our visual interpretation through a deeply Eurocentric and European viewpoint, because cinema has always been treated as an exclusively elite Eurocentric medium of art, right? And I was like, I don't like that shit. I don't like it. I feel like we can do something about it. We can try, at least, to just mess with the medium. Because that's all black people did to music. And I don't like that. You know what? I'm gonna play these other notes, on this other side of the beat. That's bebop. That's like, people are on this other side of the rhythm, right? And so I had like, 10 years of the blessing of touring the world and just being adept at like improvising and making things like with my band. And, wherever that came from, I was like, I want to, I might be terrible at film. I don't know. But if I can just get close to this thing that I feel when I'm on stage and my band's behind me and we're literally floating, right? Like, what is that? And that was it. I was just like, all right, I'm going to take whatever little money I have, which wasn't much, and I'm just gonna just be trying. And that was Diasporadical Trilogia. I was like, what is it like when a little girl is with a spirit guide? Okay, it's not, it's not what George Lucas would do. It's not what Martin Scorsese would do. It's not what Spielberg would do. This is what I would do, and this is how I'll move the camera, and this is what I'll do with the light, because it feels like that. It's deeply African, right? And the amazing thing, something happened. It's just, that's kind of why, guys, I'm the king of advocating trying. Again, it could have just all come to naught. And I will not be sitting here with you marvelous people. I mean, I would have found a way, but that magic of doing something else and challenging the norm and going, I feel like we can stretch this thing further. And I'll tell you another thing. It is incalculable how much the world loses every day by the intentional exclusion of African creative and intellectual genius in all the art forms. Like, literally, you can't do the math on it. There's no amount of math that can explain, because what's your life like? Can you do the math on what your life is like without jazz? Can you do the math on what your life is like without hip hop, without funk, without reggae? You can't do the math. You're missing. Something is missing. And it's the same way. Like, you can't do the math on which you're missing with African literary spaces. What you're missing with African film that is left to really be African, which is a critical part. The reason why African music has flourished, no matter where you found it, is because we've been left alone. To just do our thing.
Do our thing.
And like, do your thing, bro. Do it. And I feel like because we've been free to do that, we've gifted the world just some beauty. But then when you're tasked with making a movie,
That's a whole nother
buddy, that's hard. Because again, you're just not left alone to do your thing. It's 1,000 cooks that are telling you, nope, that camera angle ain't gonna do it. And that's the fight.
Right.
And that's the fight in the literary space. That's the fight in the cinematic space. That's the fight in fine art. That's the fight in all of these spaces. That's to just be.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, the world's better for it. The world's better for it. No matter who you are, you're gonna enjoy this. I promise you. And that's what I think has been special about this journey. Going from diasporadical trilogy into the Burial of Kojo, but then also into Black is King,
Incredible.
which was kind of for me like, you know, when you get a call from Beyonce.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was just going to ask you that.
You get a call from Beyonce, that goes, that little thing that you did in Ghana, I want that.
Right.
I go, okay, I wasn't crazy after all.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank
It's
you.
incredible. So incredible. I have to ask you about hip hop.
Sure.
Because I love hip hop and you love hip hop, and I think hip hop was at its best in the 90s, like early 90s.
I don't think anyone can argue with
You
that.
know, like De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Pete Rock and CL Smooth, KRS-One. Just how inventive it was and the way they were telling Black stories with such verve and ingenuity. I read somewhere that you said Public Enemy coming to Ghana in '92 was a critical moment for your creativity. And I would just love you to talk about that a little bit.
I mean, that, oh man, you know, again, when you talk about this magic that is just Black expression, right? I think hip hop was kind of an amazing culmination of that, you know, and especially because of how marginalized it was, and even by other Black music connoisseurs and creators. You know, hip hop was deeply looked down upon as a low rung of this genius, right? But something was happening to us all over the world. You know, I was in Ghana and hip hop came to Ghana, right? This was not like, but it didn't come like, there was no company. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta understand how this shit happens. Like, there's no, you know, hip hop machine that lands in your country and goes, all right, you guys, here's the hip hop shop. Come get whatever you want. I mean, you got to do it with Coca-Cola. That machine's got to go there and do that. Not hip hop. We heard one song on the radio, and it was cult-ish. We all like will gather. Like you remember. There's some young ones in here, but there's some old ones too. I mean, I had like cassette tapes ready. You guys remember what those are? Cassette tapes. Okay, good. So I had those and literally would wait. There was a station called Groove FM, man. And the wild thing about Groove FM, which, by the way, now that I think about it, it was like deep piracy. Because, but it didn't matter. Because they will literally just play the record. Like, wouldn't talk over it, wouldn't do anything. It's just like, hey, here's the new, I don't know, Biggie Smalls album. And then play it. And here we were, like, cassette goes in, you know, the two hands, you have to know how to hit those two. Guys are fronting like you don't know this life. Come on. You have to hit those two and pray that the shit does not eat your tape. Now if that happened, that was a ruined night, okay? And I say that to say, I mean, that's the power of a culture, and it gave us something that we were deeply lacking in our music at the time. High life music had reached a point. This was post-coup d'etat in the 60s, post-coup d'etat in the 80s, and a lot of high life musicians had left the country, and they had come back with a form of high life called Borga high life. And Borga high life, you know, I wouldn't say anything bad about it, but it just wasn't doing it for us. Now, there were a few, the Daddy Lumbas, the Amachi Day Days, they were in there doing it, but we needed something else. And they were also all about love. It was just like love songs. You know, it's just like, okay, another love song, another love song. So hip hop was just like, wow, you can do that? You can just tell stories? And you gotta understand, we didn't understand half of what these people were saying. I mean, you still kind of understand half of what Ghostface Killer is saying, some of the Wu-Tang is saying. But we were in there because the vibe and the feeling felt familiar. And then what we started doing was taking what they were doing and then kind of, because the beautiful thing about hip hop is it's basic math. It's sample culture. So you take something that's old, you find a way to repurpose it, recreate, and then you kind of put something new over it, right? And that formula can be cooked up anywhere, you know? And so like the more I traveled, I was just in Cuba, like listening to their hip hop from that time, I was like, boy, it's the same thing. And the beauty is that you could use the music that's tangential to you to create hip hop. So then guys in Cuba are using whatever music that's indigenous to them. Folks in Brazil are using, bossa and MPB and samba to make their hip hop. We were using high life to make our hip hop. And shout out to pioneers like Reggie Rockstone and Obrafo and Hama and that group who were like the early adapters. And I tell this story just to say, by the time Public Enemy arrived, we were primed, right? And we were ready. And more than anything, let's remember also what was happening in hip hop culture at the time. It was deeply African, right? It was Africanized. I mean, the giant medallions and the kufis and the dashikis and, that was hip hop, right? Now, there were also Jerry Curl folks on the West Coast. Let's not forget our NWA brothers, okay? But it was fairly balanced, It was fairly balanced. And I think that Public Enemy arriving, it was radical shifts. We were just like, first of all, the knowledge. We heard about Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro. The things that we didn't know, like, even though W.B. Du Bois is buried in Ghana, like, we didn't know much about that. We weren't taught that stuff in school. So hip-hop became kind of our access to our larger diaspora. And I can attest that it saved a lot of our lives. It made us understand that the world is bigger, blackness was expansive, and our stories mattered. Yeah. And, that's how I got into hip-hop in that window. And it has truly been the gift that has kept giving. 50 years of it, by the way.
Yeah,
which is
yes, absolutely.
Unimaginable.
Revolutionary.
Indeed.
Absolutely revolutionary. I remember being in boarding school and being obsessively listening to Tupac Shakur's Me Against the World. Woo! Still one of my favorite albums. Probably, I think, still his best album, his most intimate and most personal album. Incredible. But yeah, absolutely like mutual love of hip hop. I want to touch on something that I think is really interesting that you've discussed, which is this idea of genetic memory.
Sure.
And by that, I think from your interpretation of it is what sits in the bone,
sure.
What sits in the marrow, how we carry that with us, whether that's childhood trauma or long buried memories that you forgot about that come to the surface and how they can change and mutate. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really interesting and how that's informed your filmmaking.
Yes. Look, our journeys here are, even though we would like to think that we arrive here out of some very clear linear path, our journeys are very traumatic, if you really looked as to how you arrive here, and I'm not just talking about your grandparents and your great-grandparents, because that's where it ends for most of us. I'm talking going further back to, we're an amalgam of so much energy and trauma. And sometimes we react in ways without knowing where it comes from, and I sadly, because of the ways in which our past has been abbreviated, so few of us know how and why we are who we are, right? And so for me, in my storytelling, I've just tried to honor that part. Part of it is unknown. Part of it is like imagined. But I do know that I come from something, and a lot of circumstances had to align for me to be here. A lot of, near misses, we almost, we're almost not here. It's like, think about how your parents met. Think about how their parents met. Think about if she missed that bus, if he missed that train, if she missed that plane, if da-da-da-da-da. I mean, so being here, guys, I mean, you got to honor that. If nothing at all for this insane, many deep coincidences and near misses that there's meaning to you being here, guys. It's not random. It can't be random because it almost didn't happen. You know what I mean? And so I say that to say, you know, I've just been curious about that a lot and just been asking myself, how does that affect my work? How do I honor that part of just knowing that I'm here from a long line of survivors? That's another thing you've got to remember. Look at how, I mean, our lives are, a walk in the park considered, I mean, compared to what our ancestors had to, I mean, that was like, survive, you're almost not here. You know what I mean? Like one weird disease and you're not here. You know, one, you know, bushfire and you're not here. One rock that tumbles and you're not here. It's just, it's all these things. And so I've been, again, just deeply aware of that and just always just been trying to go, all right, what's the purpose? Like what, you know, okay, let me just keep going and keep doing because, yeah, it's just to honor that.
It's a reminder, isn't it?
It's a reminder.
To put things into perspective. I want to touch on the fact that, so Blitz is, as you can see, incredibly generous character wherever he goes, just has so much to give and is really all about community. When you were making the Burial of Kojo, you actually created an infrastructure for production in Ghana. I just love this so much. For production in Ghana that wasn't there, essentially. You could have gone with a Hollywood crew, but didn't because he wanted to help nurture and cultivate voices in Ghana. Because if you just have a Hollywood crew, what do you leave? What do you leave Ghana with? So I love that you've set up the African Film Society as well as part of this. And what you guys do is you screen films by great African filmmakers like Simbem, Disrabil Diop, so that people can understand the language of filmmaking. I mean, it's so generous to do that. Could you talk just a little bit about your intentions regarding that?
For sure, and thank you for that. When I went to Ghana to make the Burial of Kojo, I was seeking inspiration. I know that I'm not there to invent African cinematic language. It already exists. My job was just to find it and add some new vocabulary. That was it. I knew enough to know that I wasn't birthing anything new. But then the challenge was that I just couldn't find, or there was no access to it, you know, and I would kind of scour the internet and I'll find one film from like the 1950s shot in Ghana and I'll bring the crew together, because it was almost like we were literally on the internet going, you know, how do you make a movie? Okay, what does a cinematography do? Like, what is, you know, like, it was stuff like that. We were like super basic in trying to make this film. And I remember just going, okay, while we're in here watching these movies and learning and growing, why don't we make this accessible to others? Because first of all, if we don't know, then certainly they don't know out there. And then the other thing that struck me too was, this film's for them. So, you know, because I'm aware as to kind of how the West operates, right? You make a film, they parade you around the film festivals, your film goes there to die. Okay? And did I lie? Did I lie? Okay? We all know somebody who made a brilliant film, went out there and they were paraded, trust me. And then you went, where do I find your movie? Nope, it doesn't exist. It died there. Okay, and so for me, I always knew that I would need infrastructure to make my film available to the people I made it for first. Again, my work's gonna travel, and I'm very thankful for that. It's affecting lives everywhere. People are enjoying this film, but I made it for these people, and they needed to see it. But also to see it and appreciate it are different things. Right? We see things all the time, but can we appreciate it? And I knew that for them to truly appreciate my film, they had to know that I was part of a legacy of African film that had come way before me, post-independence and some pre-independence, right? And just kind of how that language had evolved. And so that's where Africa Film Society came from. So we started, commandeering some football parks, which wasn't easy. Because first of all, you got to tell the football players to excuse themselves. But also it's Ghana, so it's church. Okay, that follows the football players. So now you have to beg those people to excuse themselves once a month so that you can show a film. And by the way, they'll come and say, is it a Jesus film? And I'm like, bro, everything can't be a Jesus film. Everything can't be a Jesus film. There's other films out there. Anyway, so that is kind of what we did, and I'm so proud of this initiative. It is homegrown. We just got our first big space where we're building a 50-seater indoor theater. Again, because it's hard to get like the big established, if you're an indie filmmaker in Ghana, the big established like theaters in the mall to show your movie, because you got to literally buy out every seat to do that. And so, it's a space where young filmmakers can come. It's also serving as a film archive of sorts, which I find also very important, that we are preserving and archiving our work every time we try to get a film to screen at Classics in the Park. So let me also explain the program really quickly. Classics in the Park shows African and African diaspora films made between the 1950s and the 1990s. That's kind of the period in which we are excited about. We've shown films from everywhere in the diaspora and on the continent. And again, the goal for us was just to make sure that people are educated on the language, because Ghanaian film school students aren't watching these movies. So then what language are they building? And they're watching Scorsese movies. I love Martin Scorsese, but he can't be my conduit to making films. I need to see what Usman Sembene's done, because that's more akin to my storytelling. I need to know what Kwawan San's done. I need to know what, Jibril Diopman Baptiste done, Safi Faye's done. I need to know what they've done, because then I can go, oh, that's where they left off. That's what I'm gonna add. And so that's been a fantastic initiative. It's run, we fund it out of our own pockets, which I'm also incredibly proud of, because, and for those of you who've been on the continent, you know that a lot of these initiatives are often foreign institutional funded initiatives. And I find that a bit troubling, because what it does is it builds a deep dependency that is unrealistic, because you're at the whim of whatever that organization says or does. And I think we have to take ownership. And again, it's a fantastic atmosphere. Every kind of person shows up. We also sit on mats, which I love, because it just kind of brings, it creates an atmosphere. There's not a lot of public programming in Ghana, right? Where and Ghana is also, as you probably know, in different countries and certainly even here, deeply classist. So it's very few things that bring a lot of people together who come from diverse backgrounds and financial means. And so it's just been great to sit and watch all types of people on those mats. The market woman who's tired and puts her wares down and sits and watches a movie next to, as we call them, Dadabi kids, very rich kids, who pulled up in their Benz, okay? And for me, that's how a society grows. Also with the expat, who's next to them going, I didn't know this existed, right? So we've been truly inspired by that, and we're going to continue to grow this institution, and hopefully when you guys are in Ghana, come pay us a visit.
Oh, we will. I mean, now that you've invited us, we're definitely going to
One at a time.
What a fantastic initiative. I love it. It's grassroots. It's about community. I can already imagine the market women. Some of my favorite people.
They're the best.
Just there,
They're the
watching.
best. And they always have a question.
And commentating as well. Yeah.
Why? And I'm like, I didn't make the movie.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. So as you heard earlier, Blitz is the director of the new Color Purple movie. Hello. Produced by Steven Spielberg, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones. I mean, it is mega. And he's going to be everywhere next year. So this is a real treat for you guys. I'm so excited about this film because I know what a visionary artist you are. You've got an incredible cast involved. What a blessing.
Huge.
I have to touch on how this project came to you because I heard it literally came to you in within a 2-week space or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It was insane.
That's amazing and a testament to you as a creative that happened.
Thank you. Wow. It was deep COVID. You guys remember that time where you're just at home going, what is this? Is the world ending? Is it over? You know, I had just finished Black is King with Beyoncé, and it wasn't out yet, but we had kind of stopped because COVID. So we were just like, all right, what's going to happen with this? And so it was a tough time because I was like, man, we've done this great thing. I don't think anyone's going to get to see it, you know? And B is notorious for not putting stuff. I mean, she's sitting on God knows, right? So I was just in a tough place, you know? Money had run out, whatever Beyonce had given me, I had spent. So, you know, I'm just like, all right, guys, this is it, you know? We had a good run, pretty much, was it. And then, you know, my agent called me and said, you know, I got a call, you know? Someone's seen your work and want to talk to you about the color purple. I was like, the color what? The color purple, yeah, you know, they're remaking it. And I was like, why? I was like, that film's amazing. It's good. Don't touch it. It was at a time where it was like, oh, a lot of people were messing up classics. So I was just like, oh, not me. and then, you know, they were like, you know, but, you know, you should read the script. You know, you don't know, you never know. And I read the script and I was like, okay, there's something there, you know. And then I started also going, oh boy, if this falls into the wrong hands, it's gonna be bad, like real bad. So I was like, okay, well, here's the deal. If you guys would allow me to really make this movie how I make movies, which I was expecting them to say, hell no. But they were like, yeah, come pitch. You know, come pitch and tell us what you're, and first thing I was like, all right, so we're gonna give Celie an imagination. Boom, that's what I'm leading with. All right, what's that mean? It's like, well, you know, she's gonna see things, you know, she's gonna like, you know, because I was like, you know, people who deal with trauma and suffer trauma, you know, the mind is the most fertile place. I didn't know much, you know, I was like making stuff up, you know? and then I was like, but you know what, you know, she's gonna imagine like, you know, like a 50-piece orchestra, you know, like, you know, she's gonna have like this giant gramophone, and that I was just grambling, and I was like, I'm definitely not getting this job, you know. And then, you know, somehow it was like the first producer was like Scott Sanders. He was like, you know, no one's kind of pitched this. I think you should tell Oprah about this. And I was like, you mean like the Oprah? Yes, okay, boom. So like this is a Monday, let's call it like a Tuesday or Wednesday, because, you know, you got to get, you know, billionaire, you got to figure out the timing for her. So then she goes, tell me about your plan. I go, okay. Celie's going to have an imagination, okay? And then she boom, 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 boom. I do my thing. She goes, oh my God, Blitz. This is it. You should talk to Steven about this. I go, as in Spielberg? Yeah, that Steven? Yes, okay, boom, here I am. Like, so let's call it Friday, another billionaire. Can't just slot you in. So, you know, Friday comes around, and then I'm on, I mean, this guy, I mean, come on, you know, we all grew up on that work, you know, so I'm like, I literally cannot believe. And it was so surreal. Every time I'll hop off those Zooms, I'll just go for a walk. Like my son was doing, couldn't go to school, so everybody was homeschooling. I was like, kid, I'll be back. and I'll just go, because I literally could not believe it was happening. Wow. And then, you know, same thing with Steven. Celie's gonna have an imagination. This is what she's gonna do, and boom, boom, boom. And then he goes, Blitz, I think you've got it. You should go make your movie.
Amazing.
And literally the next week, I had a job making.
Wow, come on. Yes. Incredible.
Yeah, making a version of a book I deeply love. I mean, it's one of
Alice Walker.
classic,
incredible.
and I got to tell you, it was one of the first books I read that dealt with not only a black woman in the rural South having an expansive mind, like knowing the continent of Africa existed and her sister was there, and having, because for me, like I wasn't, I was kind of making it up, but I was also not making it up. She was talking to God, all those dear gods. I mean, that requires imagination, right? And I think that our version of this film is a true contribution, to such a brilliant work that has gone from a Pulitzer Prize-winning book to a Steven Spielberg classic to a Tony Award-winning Broadway play to us. It was a tremendous responsibility and truly one of the greatest honors of my life, to really lean into a cast like we had. I mean, Fantasia Barrino, Coleman Domingo, Danielle Brooks, Taraji P. Henson, Halle Bailey. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we got a cameo I can't talk about. Damn, you should see the movie when it opens. It's amazing. And look, I mean, it's been incredible to see the response. The trailers have just, really connected with people. And, look, come Christmas, we are going to paint the world purple.
So excited.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's gonna
amazing.
Happen.
Speaking of the trailer, let's take a look at the trailer for The Color Purple.
Fantastic.
Today, our teacher taught us about a place called Africa. She say our mamas come from Queens over there. That means that we, royalty.
Don't need you to love me.
Afternoon. I needs me a wife.
Even if we have to part, you and me, us have one heart.
I don't need.
Get off my land!
You.
I write you every day. Daddy! Nothing but death can keep me from it.
You must ain't got no kinfolk around these parts.
All I had was my sister. She was the only one ever loved me. I'm gonna hold my head up. I'm gonna put my shoulders back.
It's time for you to see the world. There's gonna be some changes made.
Put it on. This ain't me.
Hush. We need to look like we belong. Let's see the smile and color. Oh, sweet and loving God.
Showing my heart to the folks that I'm close to.
Now we're talking. Dear Celie, we are more than just kings and queens. We are at the center of the universe.
Oh, yes, I
Wow, that looks epic. I cannot wait to see it at least twice, honestly. It's so exciting. Before we wrap up, we have one question from an audience member. Samantha says, Blitz, 4 exclamation marks. I love your work. Have you read any detective stories by Ghanaian-American writer Kwai Kwate? Who are your Ghanaian literary inspirations?
Oh, sure. No, I have not read Kwai Corte's work. But, I mean, I have a few favorites, starting, of course, with Aikweyama, who's, like, for me, the god. Beautiful Ones Not Yet Born is still one of my favorites. So he's top of the list for me. There's also Amata Edu, who
Yes.
recently passed away, God rest her soul. She's another just brilliant, brilliant writer that I grew up on. Dilemma of a Ghost is one of my favorite books. And then, you know, I mean, we have such a burgeoning new, you know, class of writers that are all just phenomenal, and I suggest you look them up. I mean, just, you know, some of them are diaspora-based, some of them are, you know, based at home. Caleb, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Azuma Nelson.
Yeah, very exciting.
Is another brilliant one. You know, there's Tai Selassie, who you should know. She's quite amazing as well. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. Man, you can shout them out, guys. Is it? You know, my brother who's in the house, Aikwe Parks. Shout out to you. Yes. There's you know, what I'm loving these days is just like we're taking control of the narrative, right? And we are doing what I think the beauty is we're also building infrastructure around, and I was having this conversation earlier, around, you know, what it looks like for us to control the means of production and control the means of just owning our narratives. You know, where a lot of us are deeply dependent and reliant on publishing houses that, you know, frankly, look at us as the flavor of the month. And yes, we are a fly flavor, but you know, we should understand and remember that grand opening, grand closing, right? We have to be aware that for us to continue to do this work, we have to do more than just be artists. I say this all the time. I sadly don't believe that an African creative has the privilege of just being an artist. I think we are unfortunately and fortunately sometimes saddled with the responsibility of creating space. This is the only way we safeguard our legacy and create space for those who are coming. And they're deeply reliant on the work we do now. It's a great window for us, but let's not forget windows open and close. And it's important that if we want to stay perpetually open, which is our job, we have to create the space and infrastructure and institutions that allow us to continue to do the work at our pace.
Amazing. Blitz, listen, we've run out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
incredibly generous. Such a fascinating conversation. Could have just talked for
I know.
2 extra hours.
And ladies and gentlemen, please, the illustrious. Thank you for sending me your book, by the way. All right, please. A brilliant, brilliant writer. It was deeply inspirational for me.
That's
Thank
so
you.
generous.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Blitz.
it.
Appreciate you.
Yes,
yeah, the evening's come to an end. Thank you so much to you guys for attending. Thank you to our online audience as well for joining us. Huge thanks to Keith Shiri and Desta Hell, Africa Rights, for putting on this festival. Hopefully we've kicked it off in style. Please, yeah, you can whoop. Please do attend the rest of the festival events if you can. Huge thanks to the British Library and the Royal Society of Literature, partners for this festival and all the support they've given. Check out their season of events as well. But yeah, time to wrap up. Stay behind. Blitz will be signing books, so get some books and stay behind to have a chat with him. Thank you all so much.